In this video, we are going to talk about Azure role-based access control and how we can integrate with Azure Active Directory to control access to AKS environment and provide only specific access. There are two parts of it. One is authentication with Azure Active Directory to download kubeconfig file, and another part is authorizing with RBAC to allow only specific operations. So let's get started. Let's create a Kubernetes cluster here, and we are going to choose a resource group that already exists, and the SQ size to be the lowest possible here, dev test, which is sufficient for our lab environment. Let's give a name, AKS demo 1, and choose the node size to the minimum possible here, sufficient for our lab. Keep auto scaling to true and choosing the node count range to maximum at 2. This is the system node pool, though we can add uh, more node pools, but which is not required for this scenario that we are going to explain here, though we can always go and create new pools here. Now, this is the place where we are going to um, do the authentication and authorization, but I will do it later. Let's keep it default at this point of time. Networking, also we are keeping it to default kubenet, doesn't matter for this lab, though we can choose Azure CNI. Rest of the things we are going to keep it default and going to create the Azure Kubernetes cluster. So this is going to take some time, and I'm going to pause the video here. Okay, so validation is passed, and I'm going to create the resource now, which is again going to take some time as it is initializing the deployment, and I'm going to pause the video. Okay, so now deployment is in progress and it's going to take some 5-10 minutes. So I'm pausing the video and we'll come back once the resource is ready. Okay, so the cluster is created and let's go inside it. Let's move to cluster configuration to see the configuration that it has. Authentication and authorization. This is the place that we were talking about and we kept it to default, but um, we are going to change it to Azure AD Authentication with Azure RBAC. But before that, I'm going to show you the config file, kubeconfig file that we have here, and that is in the home directory. So we do dir kube, and this is the config file that we have. We logged into the AKS cluster earlier, and that's why we have an existing context in this config file, which we can see through kubectl command config get contexts, and this was the context, but we are going to start from the scratch, so I'm going to delete the entire cube folder. So I'm going to do cube and yes to all. So the cube file is folder is deleted, and I think I have already logged into Azure, which I can check through. I think I can check through AZ account, show query, and user dot name, and yes, we logged into logged in through this user ID. Now I'm going to list the AKS cluster that we already have here. So this is the cluster we have here, and this cluster name and the resource group, and we are going to fetch the credentials and merge it with the kubeconfig file, or create the kubeconfig file from the scratch because we already deleted it. So az aks get, I think, get hyphen credentials, just to make sure there's no typo here. Name is the AKS demo and resource group is demo, right? So this is one way. We can also fetch it from going to the overview section, and then from the connect we can copy and paste this command. So once it is done, let's see what is inside this kubeconfig file. So we are going to cat the output here, kubeconfig, pipe it to open through Visual Studio Code here. So as we can see, there are three parts of it: cluster, context, and users. So there are three lists basically, right? So we can fold all: cluster, context, and users. So there are basically uh, three lists over here, and this is the context that we have. Now let's log in through a different user, and let's first see the user that we have here in Active Directory. We have a group, AKS group, and inside that group we have a member user2, and we are going to log in through this user2. But first of all, we're going to see the role assignment that we have here for this group, and we can see AKS group only has the reader role. So let's try it. So az login use device code, and let's paste this code here and log in through user 2. So that's my two-factor authentication proved. Now as I logged in through user 2, let's try to get the credentials again, and surely we can see that our authentication has failed here. So we are going to assign a role, right? So we go to the role assignment here, add a role assignment, right? And we are going to choose Azure Kubernetes Service Cluster user role. Select the member, AKS group, select, next, review and assign. All right, so going to take some time here. It's done. So let's try again with the same command. And this time we are done. So basically what it says that we need to have at least Azure Kubernetes Service Cluster user role to download the credentials and merge it with the kubeconfig file. But now the question is, that whether we are going to get any pods by running the kubectl command. Let's try that. To the all namespace, and surely we are able to do it. But let's say that now we go to the cluster configuration that we were talking about last time, and instead of local accounts with Kubernetes RBAC, let's choose Azure AD Authentication with Azure RBAC and see the difference now. Let's apply it. I think it's going to take some time here. Yeah, it started. So I'm going to pause here for some time. Now as it is done, let's try again. All right, it's done here. Let's try running the credentials, get credentials again to merge with the existing config that we have, and then run the get pods to get the pods and see if we are able to get it. So as we can see now, it's again asking for the authentication, and this is because of the RBAC authentication that we have, authorization that we have. So let's give it a try. Open it. Paste the code and user 2. Right, let's close it. And we can see it's forbidden because it's still lacking some role which is required to fetch or get the pod details, right? So let's try it out. Let's go to Azure. Okay, so let's see the group and the roles that it has. So it has only Azure Kubernetes Service Cluster role. Let's assign one more role to it, and that should be Azure Kubernetes Service RBAC Reader. Let's assign it to the group that we have here. Next, and assign. So once it is done, Probably it's taking some time here. It's done here. So let's go again and download the credentials one more time. Okay, overwrite it. Now let's run the kubectl get pods. Authenticate again. User2 .com.in. Let's wait, and we can see now we are able to get the pod details. So that says we should have uh, two roles: service cluster user role and service RBAC reader role. Now we are able to get the pods, but are we able to create something? So let's say we try to create a namespace. Let's say the name of the namespace is demo, and again we are again left with forbidden. So we don't have rights or authorization to create something. So let's modify that behavior with a cluster role YAML and cluster role binding YAML file that we have. So this is a cluster role, and through this YAML file we are giving some additional rights to it: get, list, watch, create, update, and patch, right? And uh, let's update the cluster role binding to provide the group ID details. So let's run it. So we are going to say kubectl apply and the file name, and let's copy the path and paste it here. And now I'm going to paste the cluster role. So that's also configured now. I'm going to log in through user2 now, and I'm going to pause the video. I have logged in through user2. Let's try again. And this time I'm able to get the pods. Now let's try to create a namespace. Kubectl create namespace demo, and we are able to create it. But we only have rights, as you can see, to get, list, watch, create, update, and patch. We don't have a rights to delete. So we shouldn't be able to delete the namespace in that case. Delete namespace demo, and we don't have. So this says that we can provide some additional rights through cluster role and cluster role binding to get more granular with the privileges and the authorization that we want to give, and the verbs that we are going to run through kubectl command. Though we have the RBAC reader role, we can surely perform some write access through the cluster role that we define through the manifest file here, and we can restrict access to some other things through this YAML files. So I hope this was informative, and thanks for watching.